Okay, hello everyone. Good evening and thank you for joining us. We are so excited to have you here with us today as we introduce the newest addition to our coaching faculty at New Masters Academy. But before we do that, before we make the big reveal, I want to tell you something special about our new coach that makes this even more exciting. Our latest coach, who you are about to meet, is extremely talented in guiding beginners on their artistic journey. They provide the foundational skills and encouragement that are necessary to start strong. And they also have unique expertise in creating stunning animal portraits that capture the essence and spirit of the animal kingdom through art. Our new coach is here to guide you, to inspire you, and to help you achieve new levels of artistic excellence. And we cannot wait to we cannot wait for you to meet them. But I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet. First, I have another thing to say. If you are part of the class of 2027, you know that students in this program are organized into houses that correspond to trees and that have a designated coach. Well, now I'm ready to tell you that we are officially introducing a new tree and house that is available for all class of 2027 students. We proudly introduce to you the Acacia House. So acacias are very common where I live. They have a beautiful they have beautiful yellow flowers, at least the species that we have here. But and while we're at it, let me tell you a little bit more about the acacia tree, which is a symbol of resilience and strength and holds a myriad of valuable traits. With its dense hardwood and medicinal properties, it embodies endurance and healing. Notably, its production of gum arabic and ability to enrich soil fertility inspire innovation and growth. As a sanctuary for wildlife and a beacon of natural beauty, the acacia tree represents harmony and vitality. Its ornamental allure, with captivating blooms and lush foliage, ignites a spirit of creativity and possibility. So, if you wish to join the Acacia House and receive individualized artistic guidance with this coach that we are about to meet, please email coaching@nma.art with your request transfer. Having said that, I believe I made you wait long enough, and now the time has come for us to reveal the newest NMA coach. So, please join me in a warm welcome as we unveil the identity of our latest addition to the new Masters Academy coaching faculty. I am very pleased to introduce you to, and many of you guessed correctly on the Discord, and if you have been a new Masters Academy for at least a day, you already know and love this artist. Our newest coach is Heather Lanevsky. So welcome, Heather.
Art, thank you so much. That was a very generous introduction.
Yeah, such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I'm very excited.
and by the way, if you have questions for Heather, feel free to leave them in the chat, and I will relay them to Heather. And I'm sure a lot of people here already know you, but please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey guys. Yeah, I love teaching and I love connecting and being a part of a community. And so I met with New Masters a while back in Huntington. I worked in Los Angeles for the last about 5.5, 6 years in Hollywood doing entertainment illustration. And my wife is Australian, and we got an opportunity to come back after COVID while things were still remote and locked down. And we decided it would be quite fun to come to Australia and be with her family and have a bit of an adventure here for a while. So I'm now in Sydney.
That's awesome. So I was told that you made a transition from a career in dentistry to pursue painting full time. How was this experience for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That was a bit of a 180 in a lot of ways. I had gone into I was a dental hygienist and I had never really meant to do it full time. My dad was a dentist and I thought, oh, it'd be fun to work with him a little bit. And I'd actually really secretly wanted to be an artist. But when I was at university, I wasn't at like an art school. It was more at a university to play sports and make friends and, you know, have a couple of drinks and costumes at theme parties, etc. And the art classes there, they weren't particularly helpful in instruction in any kind of traditional techniques. And I thought, oh, I'm probably not good enough to do art. And since it wasn't really being taught, I figured if you're not good enough and you can't learn it, you better do something else. So I did dental hygiene and thought maybe someday I'd come back to it. And yeah, at some point I just couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I wasn't, you know, now I would describe it as like wanting to live more authentically, but I don't think I would have had that language at the time. I just felt like I tried to do what I thought I was supposed to do, and it was starting to scream at me to try to have a creative career. And so I don't know how much you want me to go into this, but I found an artist because I saw his painting up in an antique shop. And I thought, no, this is like an amazing painting. And I asked the woman if he was dead or alive. And she goes, no, he's living. I said, does he teach art classes? And she gave me his phone number. And I think I was terrified. I was like maybe in my 20s, but I called him, like I cold called him and asked if he would help teach me. And so meeting Terry Mura, who's an artist from Southern California that ended up in Sacramento, California, helped me sort of start that transition and sort of help me sort kind of a path forward. I'll pause there because I can go on, but maybe I should not. You know, if you want more.
I think it's a very interesting topic because I think a lot of people can relate to that, and I see people agreeing in the chat.
Well, he was wonderful. The only problem was he wasn't my full-time art school. He was an artist working that was actually giving a lot of his time generously to me, but I was still working a full-time job. And he was giving me like assignments to do on my own and giving me a bit of critique. And I'd probably get, you know, 2 or 3 hours of work done a week. And at some point I started doing that math problem and realized at that rate, I was never going to really give it a shot. And I had to make this call like, okay, what's the point of life? Like, am I just going to go all in? And I decided it would be way more fun to give it a shot. And I'd already tried the other way, not giving it a shot. And that really didn't feel good. So yeah, I would have loved to keep taking from him. But what I ended up doing was trying to find a way to study more full time. And at that point, I'd heard of Watts Atelier because I knew people that had gone and taken workshops. And I looked up their schedule and they had classes available like 10 hours a day, almost 7 days a week. And I thought, well, this way I can immerse myself. And, you know, they say it takes so many hours to become an expert. And I thought there's a chance for me if I really go try to commit and study. And I ended up moving down to Encinitas in North County, San Diego for a while. And until I couldn't comfortably spend any more of my savings, I think I did like a couple years or a year and a half at Watts to start to get more hours in traditional, you know, art education. And then from there, I met Joshua at New Masters and started really seeking out different teachers and taking more classes, and somehow ended up after, I forget how many years it ended up taking, but I did eventually end up getting into entertainment illustration. And that's sort of another story, which also I'm happy to get into, but it was a long breadcrumb to breadcrumb to breadcrumb. The job I ended up doing, I didn't even know existed. Not even at Watts had I heard of it before. Not until I got to Los Angeles and really scrappily started, just having conversations with people. And it was a really, when you do something like medicine or accounting or engineering, that path is quite clearly defined and regulated, and there's a clear path to follow. And I don't know that we had new masters when I was starting to think about that, but it was sort of one of those things that I wish that I'd had back then, because I kind of had to do it on the fly to the best that I could in between side jobs and all that kind of stuff.
So you had to make your own path.
Sort of stumbled along as I went. Yeah, totally.
So, and what advice would you give to students or artists in that position who are considering a career change to pursue their passion?
I think that's a really good question. So if you're considering it, that means you've got some level of desire. And I would sit quietly and journal and ask yourself if that's something that you love and you want it to be a passion project, or if that's something you want to be your business and your career. And if you do think that there's a chance you might want it to be your business or career, then I would say I have some advice that kind of helped me along. And I would say having a bit of a goal to start is nice, but you may not know exactly what that means. But get as clear as you can to start, and then you want to buy yourself some time to get there. If you were going to go study to be a lawyer and you wanted to be one of the best lawyers, you'd probably plan 4 years of one school and then 4 years maybe of another school. And I'm not saying it takes necessarily that long, but what you want to do is give yourself the time to pursue your passion. And I am a big fan of the day job and also making a budget. Like, these are just really practical things. But if you can get a day job that is flexible around your goals and your desires to pursue art, keep it. Just keep it. You'll get to meet people. You'll get to interact in other ways. And artists, especially if you're working remotely, there's sometimes a tendency to become isolated and only influenced by artists. If you follow other artists, if all your friends are artists, I think we get tunnel vision a little bit and we forget there are other lessons to learn as well, like on the outside of that. And to be honest, most of my clients actually ended up being friends I met. I was like their dental hygienist, so even the way I started ended up being sort of through a day job. That's how I was able to get into art. And so make a budget and learn a little bit about taxes, your Schedule C, important to learn about that. And that way you're giving yourself a chance to enjoy a process and a lifestyle. Because it really is more about, like how you want to live, to be totally honest. So don't feel turned off by the idea of a day job. I actually remember Jeff Watts telling me at one point too, careful of low paying art jobs, because you're so keen to get a job and feel like a professional artist, I think, when you've been an amateur. And it feels so exciting when someone maybe wants to give you an art job. But if you start taking a lot of low paying art jobs, you actually end up sometimes losing track of what your real goals were, your real passions were, or the real style you want to achieve. And you start to burn out a little bit on doing these adjacent things that aren't quite what you want to do for less money than you might actually make at Starbucks or Trader Joe's. So I've definitely found that to be true. Too many words? Am I going too long about that? I'll give it back to you.
No, on the contrary, that's very important advice that I'm sure, I don't know if artists are ready to hear this, so we appreciate it. And yeah, such valuable insights and advice, says Jocelyn. Can you share more about your experience studying fine art?
Yeah. So I think the thing that kind of kicked it off for me, that really sucked me back in after I hadn't drawn anything for years, was a studio that had open painting from life nights. And that was something I had never seen before. And that really sucked me in. And there's lots of, different things to bite into. But for me, that was kind of that alla prima thing that kicked it off for me. It felt like a game, and it was a thing where you could be fully present. It took up all the space in my head. It was exciting. There was risk involved because the clock was ticking. And so even as I went further and further and further, I really wanted to kind of try to hold on to that thing, which was the most fun to me. And obviously, you continue and you study, and it's very helpful, very, very helpful to study from photographs and use all our photography references and 3D models and things like that. And so I've definitely relied a lot on all of those types of references. But I think there's something about that feeling for me that's the most exciting, that I try to kind of remember and see if there's a way to hold and bring in as I go. And the other thing, this is just about studying fine art kind of in general. Is that what we're talking about? Yeah. So I didn't take like a specific program. I had a bit of like, chasing butterflies when I was down at Watts Atelier. There were so many great teachers. I wanted to take that one and that one and that one. I was kind of all over the place, and I lost a bit of focus just doing like a bit of a survey into all the different classes they had. And that can be quite fun, but it isn't the most efficient way to make progress, I would say. Going back, I'd do a lot of things differently, what I know now. So at this point, I've found I'm kind of doubling down with Steve Houston. His system for me is starting to really click in lots of ways, where I didn't like fully finish a traditional program. I didn't start on like a track that had been laid out. I was popping around and doing my best. So I have holes that are killing me that I want to go back and fill. And I'm actually going back now and doing a lot more figure stuff with Steve Houston. And what else can I tell you about studying fine art? I think it's great to find the people that are sort of really good at teaching the thing that's the chapter that you want to learn, whatever that thing is at the moment. If you can have time with them and ask them and get their feedback and see, if their career path is close to like what you're wanting to do, I would say spend some time kind of focusing on fewer things at once would be advice that I didn't necessarily take myself, that now years later I'm going back and trying to fill in, but always doing so with kind of your voice being the loudest. Like if I'm studying from Steve, it's not because I want to paint just like Steve. It's because I can learn so much for Steve that could work for me. So, I would say stay with like a teacher as long as you're still learning everything from them, but always step back and check it in, say, well, what are my goals? What do I want? You're not trying to become like a replicant of someone that already exists. You're sort of getting tools and inspiration for you to use in your voice. And so it's focusing on these things, but you don't have to stay too long. Stay as long as it's still serving you and your goals. And I think I'm getting off topic again, probably. This will just keep spiraling. You'll have to stop me. Sorry.
Well, you mentioned this briefly before, but can you tell us more about what drew you specifically to the alla prima style of painting?
The feeling. When I had taken art classes like at university, that it was a great liberal arts school, but it wasn't an art school. And, sometimes we would take a photo and work from a photo. And my instinct was to get quite perfectionisty about duplicating like a photocopier. Like, oh my God, could I make this look like that photo? And at first that was like a magic trick to me. Oh my God, like if I spend this like long enough, I can get that to look like that, but that's paint. But I wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't really very fun. Some people really, really love to do like, a really rendered, realistic looking portrait where maybe you're like, oh my God, I can't even tell, is that a photograph? But for me, it was kind of love-hate. I was like, this is so cool. I think I can do this, but also like, this is kind of annoying and not that fun to me. And then when I did that Alla Prima stuff, I thought, oh, this is completely different. This feels completely different. And I didn't particularly like, I don't remember being that impressed with impressionists when I was younger and everyone had like Monet postcards and things. I think it took me like trying a few things out before I started to appreciate how much harder it is to say less and to see less. And taking, classes from Steve Houston, I just feel like I'm writing down everything he says in a book. Like it's all so inspiring, but your job isn't to put everything, your job isn't to be the encyclopedia and to include everything that reality has. Your job is to say what you want to say about it. And that means filtering it down and chunking down and saying less. And Alla Prima forces it, because otherwise I can get into this trance where I'm just photocopying a thing like I did when I was younger without knowing any better. But the game is different. You're with a person with a clock, or you don't have to be with a person, with a still life, or with a landscape, with the sun changing. And it forces you to say, I can't say everything. That is impossible. So what is it that I see that I want to say? And that was a big shift for me. Also, it's just fun. Just fun. It's wet, the brushes, like the tactile sense. I love that too.
So how do you prepare for a painting session that's aimed to be completed a la prima?
I think it's best to still set like an intention. So if it was a photograph, obviously it's a bit different, but if I was like going to paint from life, and even from a photograph, it wouldn't be so different. I would sit for a minute and think about what it is I want to say. And, you can think about it like, maybe one way is thinking of the Hollywood movie. Who is the star? There is only one star. Just pick one star. Now that you've picked the star, the rest becomes supporting cast. So we're not going to say everything about everyone. We're not going to try to be fighting about it. We're going to try to say like, okay, this is the piece I want to focus on. This will be like, this is the game I'm setting up. And then Terry had me doing this, and so many other artists. Squint for a minute, take out your little sketchbook, make a little thumbnail, and I make a 3-value plan usually. You could do 2 values if you want, light, medium, dark, and literally like draw just the big simple shapes with the value plan and commit, because the model will move a little bit. You might change your mind later. You might forget and get distracted. If you're outside, the light will literally change. So you have to have already committed, to what you're doing. So you have your plan, and then that's your plan, and that's your focus. And there's plenty still to say on another day, on another painting, the next meal you have. You don't have to try every type of food all around the world in one meal. You're just having one meal. And so I think sticking to that, really helps to prepare. You can also do some other things too if you're newer, like, mix a bit of a palette before you start. Get your value groups on your palette. You could do that as well. And that can be quite smart to set you up so that you've got, your light and your dark families mixed on your palette And then you're not having to sort of mix everything as you go. You're sort of already organized. So that can be super helpful too to prepare.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. How do you choose the subjects for your paintings?
Oh gosh. I think anything that's fun or beautiful or cool to me or makes me laugh. For the last 6 years, I've been letting Hollywood tell me. And I'm sort of at a point now where I moved to Australia. I can kind of start another chapter, and I still think things with faces and heads are probably the most exciting to me. But I just kind of look to if I feel something, then I sort of try to investigate that. And so I think anything can kind of be a good subject if it speaks to you or if it inspires you, or yeah, it's kind of anything. But I think that for me, the way that often comes to me is not by going through Google or Pinterest. It's going outside, going to dinner, going to the beach, going on a walk, living and engaging with other people. And so that's one thing too, I just want to remind everybody is, we sit in front of our computers and so much information is there. But don't forget to just get up and get outside and keep your world big, because the longer you stay in one place, you can get real tunnel vision. And so I think all those things that you love doing, moving or meditating or whatever else it is, that are sort of keeping you present and engaged and connected to bigger experiences, get a snorkel, like anything that's cool can help inspire that, I think.
Yeah, that sounds very wise. And going back to the process, how do you decide when a painting is finished, especially when working a la prima?
I think it probably kind of circles back to your start. So what was it about it that made you want to paint it in the first place? What was your attention? Well, I wrote something down that Steve said the other day. I think I wrote it down. But he at one point was chatting and he said, am I in alignment with my intentions? And so if in the beginning you have an intention to say, oh my gosh, the way that cheekbone and the light and the angle of that silhouette, like that to me is the star of this sketch I'm going to do, then I think you can use that to ask yourself, okay, so that was my intention. Here's my little thumbnail. Am I in alignment with that? Am I saying what I wanted to say about that? And have I said everything I want to say about that? And this is the slippery slope. Then you don't want to go open your eyes wider. You don't want to look longer and harder for more. You want to see less, because if you go back and you start opening your eyes wider, then all of a sudden it starts to turn into an encyclopedia entry. And you're like, oh, wait, it looks really good. And this stroke was so much fun to make that maybe I want to add also this stroke here, and then also this stroke here. And then what ends up happening is if you forget your intention and you start having, this is the star, but now actually I have another star character, and now I have another star character, and I have another star character, you lose some strength. And maybe that's okay. Maybe you're trying to do some bigger illustration or something like that, but it depends on your intention. So setting that intention and squinting and seeing less and trying to stick to really your voice. And when you hear those other voices like, well, this teacher would probably do it like that, or this other guy said, make sure X, like sort out those voices in your head if you can, and just label them and say, that guy might have had a really good point, but it might not serve me on this because my intention was this. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally.
So yeah, something like that.
Well, since you mentioned Steve Houston a couple of times, so I wanted to ask you, what artist or art pieces have influenced your style the most?
What artists and art pieces? I think when I was younger, my mom took me to see a Sargent show. And I remember leaving that thinking, oh my God, I want to paint portraits. So John Singer Sargent, I remember like pretty early on. And then guys like I was obsessed with like Norman Rockwell when I was a kid, and like even Lisa Frank. I mean, there's so many. Do you guys know Lisa Frank? She was like an 80s cat folder, bright hot pink. Anyway, she was really fun. It was full on 80s. The list is like forever. So many, there's just so many people that are so talented, and it's like being in a candy shop. I almost can't even look because there's so many brilliant artists working that at some point I start to lose track of my own voice because I just love seeing what everyone else is doing. But Sargent and Sorolla, Joaquin Sorolla, the Spanish artist, I really love sort of looking at his portraits and things. And gosh, I could probably say so many. More recently, in Hollywood, I really like Akiko. Sternberger does conceptual portraits that always have a bit of a concept or an idea or a bit of wit to them. And her style is more of an illustrative style, but I just love the personality and like the brevity she brings to like her poster stuff is really, really cool, has a really good voice. So got almost anybody I think could inspire you in some way, but probably between Terry Mura, who I got to meet, and those guys were probably the big ones at the beginning, I think.
And more generally, how do you stay inspired and motivated in your artistic practice?
Well, it helps to remember how it felt before when I wasn't doing any of it. Because I already tried that. So I know that this is more fun and, better. But I really love to always be taking a class. So I just feel like I'm going to be a student forever, and having just one sort of mentor that you're looking at, or being part of a program, signing up for a workshop, those kinds of things really help me stay inspired. And if I start to get kind of low, Brene Brown. Could always use me some Brene Brown, some self-compassion, some gifts of imperfection. Some of those like podcasts, are just so uplifting. And Stephen Pressfield has that book, The Fear of Art, and he's got Turning Pro, which I definitely recommend. Maybe the one of the better books too would be The Art Spirit with Robert. I always want to say Henri, but I heard he was an expat and he liked Henry. So Robert Henry, I think is how you say it. Richard Schmid's book, Alla Prima. I mean, just picking up almost any book someone I admire will inspire me to get back in. But something with the Brene Brown stuff really helps, because if you start getting down on yourself, or you've gotten into some kind of shame spiral, or you're, doing some comparison, she sets it straight really, really quick. And you can catch yourself if you're starting to kind of fall into those patterns and you're accidentally questioning your self-worth. I love her for that.
That's interesting that you mentioned that you feel like a student, or you get a lot of enjoyment of studying constantly, because I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite aspect of teaching art and painting?
Oh, I really love the connection, and I love the dialogue around it. I do better, I think, when I'm with people and learning and growing and collaborating and brainstorming. And I don't know, I like to help if I can. And share the things that other people have shared to me. There's something about feeling grateful for, like Terry, who helped me originally, and wanting to pass it down if I can, or if there's someone else that's interested in it. There's like a sweet, uplifting kick from that synergy. Also, I just love trying to use any kind of random new metaphors or analogies. It's kind of fun finding ways to communicate concepts and things to people like from different backgrounds and different levels. I think that engagement is really exciting. And that's probably another thing that, to your last question, keeps us inspired, or helps keep me inspired.
And do you think that teaching is a way of learning too?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. The minute you have to articulate something, it's like a brilliant test you've just given yourself,
So what does a typical day look like for you when you're focusing on your art?
A typical day. I'll give you the typical ideal day, maybe, because my typical days tend to be all over the place. But I like to get up and, go to yoga or run or move somehow. If I don't go to yoga, I'm trying to do at least like a 5-minute meditation and just let some observation happen of what's going on. I love, as a warm-up, I love trying to draw my hands. They're the cheapest models in town. Just little 5-minute hand drawing, and God, that gets really addicting really quick. And then, yeah, if I'm working with an agency doing key art or movie poster concepts, then I have to make sure I'm quite clear on the brief and I have all the references and, that kind of thing. And then I put together a bit of a playlist for when I do that kind of stuff to keep me cooking, because you have to do it at a bit of a pace. So I've got my little sketch playlist that may or may not be appropriate for everybody, but I'm happy to share it if anyone wants to check it out on Spotify. And if I'm getting to do all the Prima stuff, I think it's really helpful to have, traditionally it's nice to set, or even digitally, it's nice to have as much of that set up the day before as you can. And so you can get in and, use the meat of the day to be working. Is there something else, Ara, that I can touch on more in that question? Is that answer what you were thinking?
No, I was just thinking, I'm realizing that a la prima is a lot of planning, apparently.
I don't know if it is. I think it doesn't have to be. My personality is like, I can't go into IKEA without my wife holding my hand, or I'll like get lost and have a panic attack. There's too much stimuli for me. So some people are completely different. For me, I tend to be so crazy anyway that if I don't have some kind of grounded place to start, it's a disaster. So I need some things to help me stay organized, or I cannot maintain all the balls in the air. And so if I don't have a value plan, disaster. Values, muddy, no light, dark read, forgot what I was trying to say. I am the kind of personality that those tools are really helpful for. I think someone that has a different personality might be the opposite. Maybe they need to loosen up a bit more. But I think I'm too loose already. I don't. If you have more discipline, it could be a completely different process that works for you. And I don't actually think any of these things that work for me are dogmatic at all. It's just sort of the ways I've come to find that help me. But everybody is so different. So different. I bet if you read Richard Schmidt's book, there's like, I forget how many different types of starts he has. There's so many different ways to approach it. So many different ways. So please do not think you have to do anything I just said. This is just personal.
No, but I'm interested. I can relate. So do you have any more tips about organization that have worked for you?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm kind of digging right now is that closed palette idea. And by closed palette, I mean mixing ahead of time. It's something I haven't been doing before that I've just discovered because Tina Garrett, an American artist, was in town and I took her workshop. And her workshop was on closed palettes. So that's a very specific way of doing it. I think she studied a lot with Richard Schmidt and she has different ways of approaching different things. So she might start on a black canvas one day and do something totally else. This is just one method as a tool, another option, another golf club for the bag. And I'm kind of digging it because it's something I struggle with. I find it very hard because when you're using color, there's so many things to hold in your mind. And if you're into all the pre-metal and if brush strokes are important to you and you want to leave some variety and some depth, some things that are thin and some things that are thicker, then in your mind, every stroke you're going, okay, is this the right value? Is this the right place? Is this the right amount of paint? Is this the right translucency? Is this the right opacity? There's a lot of things that you're asking in one question, and that's just one stroke. So helps me to try this method that Tina was just teaching with the families, which I sort of just talked about a little bit before. But literally, you can take your palette and you can go, okay, I'm going to look at the model, look at the model. This is going to be my light value. You know, on 1 to 10, I'll pick, you know, if 1 is light, you know, I'll pick 3. And then if black is 10, I'll pick, you know, a 7, whatever it is. But those values, now I'm mixing, this one's a little more red, this one's a little more yellow, this one's a little more desaturated gray, this one's a little bit more saturated blue, whatever. But I'm just looking going, these are all the things I might need. I'm going to pre-mix them, but they're all touching in a little circle. And then I might do that with the darks on the other side. And something that she said that's so handy is take your iPhone, take a screenshot, desaturate it, and see if it looks like 2 colors of gray. And you can sort of check your values there. And if there's one that's popping a lot lighter, then you can say, hey, that value does not match the family. And I want to keep this family close together as possible. So I'm going to go in, lighten it or darken it, whatever. And that's tricky with oil too, because lightening or darkening doesn't just mean adding white or black. You know, white cools things down. You know, so these are all these things that you can isolate a little bit. You know, like when you're driving, they say isolate the variables. You know, if this guy is about to cut in front of you, you slow down a little bit so you can miss that car and then still make the turn. I think if you start feeling like there's too many moving parts, there are tools to break it down into smaller variables so that you don't have to do everything all at once. And again, that's just because my brain has only like this much room in it. And if I put one more thing in, then something falls off the back of the truck. So I'm just trying to make it doable for me. But if that is something that sounds like it would help, I think it's really valuable. And you can take a bit of a cotton ball and dip it in clove bud oil and put it in your palette and close the lid so that all you're mixing, because that might take you an hour. You know, that could take you some time depending on if you really want to get into it. Then you can save that palette and then the next morning, you know, you're ready to go. Or if you want to paint something big, that paint will sort of dry slower and then you have some more time. So taking that closed palette workshop, I thought at this point in my life really spoke to me as a tool I want to try. So that's kind of the one that I'm looking forward to doing, you know, in the next few paintings. I'm going to try that.
Oh, that's super interesting. And I wanted to ask you more about your favorite painting tools or materials. What can you tell us about that?
I'm kind of I really like rosemary brushes. Have you guys heard of those? They're in Yorkshire, I want to say, in the UK, and they're handmade. So the bristles don't fall out as much and get in your painting. So they're quite good quality, but they're not necessarily the most expensive. They have pretty reasonable prices. So I would recommend checking those out if you're looking for brushes and you need a couple. And and it's a family business, and I've met the daughter, and I thought she was really cool. So, you know, when you like somebody, you're also like a little more excited to try their stuff. But she was great. And I don't know, I think my favorite is Bristle, because when I learned with my first mentor, Terry Mura, he would always say, one thought, one stroke. And the thing about bristles is, you know, you can't muck about too much. They're not blending and they're not smoothing. They're kind of just putting it down. And with me as a beginner, he wanted to discourage this idea of like licking and overdoing the thing. He wanted you to be present, one thought, one stroke, clean your brush, next thought, next stroke. And I think Bristle was a tool he found that helped people, you know, stick with that plan a little bit better. So I still mostly use Bristle. I have some fancy ones. I don't even know if I really know what they do. I'll end up bristling something till I'm like, why isn't this work? Oh, I haven't changed a brush in like 3 hours, you know? So I think probably bristles, and I would say rosemary brushes are cool if you want to look at that.
No, that's super interesting. Thank you. And I'm sorry, completely different topic, but I cannot not mention this.
Yeah.
We are being told that you worked on Tarantino films. How was that?
Oh, funny. Yeah. Who's out there? Is that Jeff or somebody out there? I got to be in the shop. So the thing about doing entertainment illustration is there's a massive team. There is a massive collaboration. So you've got your agency that might have, at the time that Tarantino movie came out, I can't remember if there were 200 people. It was one of the bigger agencies in Hollywood. That was BLT. And in the illustration department at BLT, there were probably 6 or 7 illustrators. And then there was this guy we called the sheriff. Have you guys heard of Steve Chorney? he was colleagues with Drew Struzan. And I think it's Chorney and his wife that actually modeled for one of the first Star Wars posters. They were the body doubles. Anyway, Chorney comes in his cowboy boots, and we all worked on concepts. The art directors, massive amounts of art directors, and that's in collaboration with the studio and the filmmaker. So there's a million different hands. I just happened to be there, to be honest. Like, I just got to be there. I hardly got to do any of the big stuff. I was an intern when I was like 34, 35. I was like one of the most inexperienced people in the shop. So I was about the lowest ranking on the totem pole. Maybe that was a year or two later, and it was pretty cool. I think we cried when they took those paintings finally, because they'd been in our shop for months, you know, before the movie came out, and they ended up actually using some of those paintings in the set. They were like fake movie posters. Like, one was like an old Italian style. And anyway, there was, I don't know, it was really, really cool to get to see that. So Chorney did some finishes on those, but with a collaboration with all the art directors and team at BLT. So I didn't actually like paint any of them, but I was like just happy to be there at that point, because, you know, I was like 10 people more experienced and higher ranking than I was. But when we went to see the movie, we were like clapping for the art. And you'll never see, you know, in the credits, they don't include that. I think they include you if, you know, you get the coffee and hold the lights and that kind of thing. But the illustration and the movie poster and the key art stuff is not, even if it's part of the set, like in the credits. So just want to shout out to Steve Chorney. If anyone knows who he is, he's fabulous.
That's so interesting. And I could go on the topic of movies, but I wanted to tackle another, a big topic. How do you deal with creative blocks?
Oh man, I try to just shift my focus. And a lot of the things we talked about before, you know, like staying inspired, I would probably repeat myself on a lot of those things, you know, getting outside and moving and going to dinner and going to a band and living and connecting and stuff, making your world bigger, getting out of your tunnel. But I get afraid all the time and it paralyzes me. Like I get overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, should I do this next or this next or this next? And it's really like that perfectionist-y thing. And I think I was talking to Steve about it and he was like, yeah, just pick one. I was like, oh yeah, just pick one, pick one, change your mind, adjust, but better to choose and go from there, because the minute you start a thing, all the other things sometimes naturally come to you. So getting in a mindset, I guess this is going to be one of those things that like people that go to yoga are going to be like, yeah, cool. And people that don't are going to be like, oh my God, that sounds lame. But like there's kind of like that way of boiling things down. That's an oversimplification maybe, but are you coming from a place of fear or love? Like if you catch yourself in like that mindset of, I think like scarcity is the way I hear it talked about a lot. That doesn't really lead to any good results. Just keeps you kind of in that place where you're scared. But if you get yourself into this mindset of like, I've heard Steve talk about like, remember when you were a kid and you were playing and drawing, like that sort of play mindset, that growth mindset, that you're always a beginner mindset. I would say check in with yourself on that, give yourself some love, some compassion. Sometimes that's all you need to do. And then if you have like a lot of ideas and you're not sure what to do, you just try one and test it. And then as soon as you start testing it, you start to get feedback. But if you don't test it, you won't ever know. So you can think yourself to death in an activity, but just try something, play a little bit.
Yeah, I think sometimes decisions can take a lot of mental energy, more than we think of. And what's the best piece of advice you ever received regarding your art?
God, it might have been that one I just said, because that's where I've been lately. I had like no time for like 6 years. Is this deadline, this deadline, this deadline. And the weird thing with those movies is they're not even coming out for like a year, but it's like triage. The vibe is like, we're in an ER. Like, no, this one's the most important. Wait, stop that one. This one just came in. They need it tomorrow. And now I have open canvas and opportunity, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm so excited. And also, wait a minute, I've never had this before, like this chance. Like what do I really want to do? And I think that maybe, let me quote some more Steve, because he's in my head, because he's the one I've been listening to lately. Playing with a bit of purpose, I think, is some really good advice. Like just to boil it down, like play, but maybe have like one thing in mind, like one intention. You don't have to get too carried away. You can add more when you're ready for it. Or he said to me, find a way you get to get the things you love to connect. And probably the other thing I'll think of is, you guys know, have you heard of Marie Forleo? She's like a life coach. She was like on Oprah. And sometimes I listen to her interviewing people. She's interviewed like Elizabeth Gilbert on creative processes and things like that. And start before you're ready, I think she said. And probably lots of people have said that maybe, but yeah, just start it. Just start. Start it, see how it goes, adjust. You can always change your mind.
That totally makes sense. And sometimes it is the most difficult part.
Yeah. When you start thinking too much, I think it's good to notice it. For me, it feels like paralysis all of a sudden. And then I'm like, oh my God, wait, hang on, like redirect. So yeah. Does that answer that question?
No, yeah, totally. All right, I think we covered all the questions we had. Is there anything you want to add before we go, or a topic you want to expand on a little bit more?
Is there anything I want to add? God, I feel like I just said so many things that everyone probably needs a break. Unless there's any specific questions, I think you've all earned relief from the sound of my voice. I don't know. Anything else that you guys can think of?
No, that sounds good to me.
Okay, cool.
And well, I wanted to thank you, Heather, and once again, welcome to the coaching team. I look forward to seeing the magic you will bring to this community, and I look forward to seeing the progress that students make under your guidance. And before we go, we got a question from Jocelyn. How did you get into pet portraiture? We didn't cover that.
Oh yeah. Thanks for asking. In my days when I was working in a dental office and dreaming of how I could have maybe had a creative life, my roommate took a photo when like the first iPhone came out. Remember when cameras started to get good? No, we probably don't because you're all probably too young, but it was like a big deal. She took a photo of her dog, and I was taking a class for fun that was painting portraits from life. And no one seemed to be wanting any portraits of humans. But she had this cute Boston Terrier, and she said, oh my God, my brother's birthday's coming up. Do you think you could paint this? And I was like, that's a good picture on your phone. Yeah. And we did a little painting for her brother. And we were both kind of really excited and surprised at how good we thought it was. I don't know. I mean, I was just like, oh my God, that actually, I kind of like it, sort of surprised. And then her sister got super jealous because she had 2 cats. And she said, well, wait a minute, you got him a painting of his dog. So then we had to do the 2 cats. And someone at the time was like, why aren't you on Instagram or sharing these on social media or something? And so I started to say, oh, look, this painting, I did this painting. And from there, it just organically happened that people kept requesting them. And word of mouth and social media, I was getting like a string of pet portraits, and I was kind of doing as many as I could in my spare time, which was mostly like weekends and evenings. And at some point, I think that is actually what gave me the guts to go move to San Diego, because I go to Watts, because I thought, oh my God, like the universe is like kind of giving me this thing. I didn't say like one day, I wonder if I could do a pet business. It just happened. And I love anything with a face, and I love animals. So I think it was just quite, I don't know. It was just one of those things that felt like a bit of a confidence builder, that it had kind of happened just from like being present and living and, talking to my friends and seeing what they needed and realizing I could do a thing that they wanted. And I thought, okay, if all else fails, maybe I could make a living as an artist, painting pets. And so that became just like the biggest request I ever got. And I did them as long as I could until I think I got really, really, really booked. I'll probably start trying to do them again now that I'm kind of branching out from that Hollywood stuff. But yeah, it was fun. Thanks for asking about that.
And do you struggle to combine like the requirements of a commission with your artistic vision? How do you find that?
I don't think I had an artistic mission, because I think I got into this doing commissions. For me, it wasn't like I had this body of work that I was just had to do. It was like, oh, this is fun to make things for people. So my way in was actually always about what I could make for the client. And I thought that was really fun. And that's completely different, I think, than a lot of fine artists. And I sort of think maybe I'm somewhere in between fine art and illustration, because I don't mind illustration either. I love a lot of illustration. So wait, say the question again, because I just totally got distracted. Do you mind refocusing me for a second?
Sure. I was wondering if you struggle to combine the requirements you get from a commission with your artistic vision.
Thank you. And you can always say no. So if someone wants you to do something and you're like, like sometimes people send me animal portraits even. So that's the thing I've done, animal portraits. But sometimes I get the photos and I think, okay, this actually should just be printed and hung as a photo. I can't get in and say more about it. You know, it might be missing something from like the thing that's tricky is I'm often getting requests from people where the animal is no longer living, or I can't go take the photo because they're across the country or something. And I can't make a good painting. I can't out of anything. I'm not that good. I can't like invent a massive amount of information and have it look the same as a painting I did from a really good reference. And so I think part of my job is to say, oh, that's a great photo, just print it. Because in a photo, we buy it. We know that's a photo. We know it's real. But maybe there's some distortion in it, or maybe, you know, it's just a tricky angle where as a photograph, you don't question it. But I can tell if I painted it, you'd be like, what? Like, what is that? You know, like you've seen probably photos of you or your friend where you're like, God, that angle doesn't even look like me. Or her hand looks super weird, like just the way it got caught there. There's certain things you can change. You know, if it's a hand, you can reshoot a hand, or I've got a hand, so I can check it out. But sometimes if it's a person with a certain budget that's after certain results, you just have to weigh it out. And so you can always say no, or you can say, I think this would work better. It's sometimes more fun not to say no, but to say, or here's another suggestion, you know, are you open to that? But I guess for me, I'm used to, I mean, the people, like the humans that aren't, you know, like movie studios are so nice to work with that I'm quite down to have those conversations with people. I mean, you see the kind of stuff you have to do professionally, and that kind of conversation is way, way more pleasant to have than like maybe the kind of Hollywood stuff that has to be done. So that actually isn't that big of a problem for me. It's kind of fun to see if you can collaborate and if you can hit like a sweet spot between two people. So for me, that's kind of a fun problem to solve, and it doesn't really bother me. But every so often, I just have to say, yeah, go ahead and just print that and hang it in a frame. It's a super cute photo.
Okay. And with that, we are already on time, so we are
Okay.
nearing the end of this Q&A. And well, thank you again, Heather, for your time. Thank you for being here. I am excited to see your contributions to the community. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It was really fun. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Oops.